Hello everybody and welcome to this ILX webinar. So today we're going to be providing you with an introduction to the ITIL 4 Foundation certification. So if you're working in a service management role or you're involved in the management of IT delivery and digital services, this session will help you understand how ITIL can really add value to your role and to your organisation. My name is Sally and I am the Sales Director here at ILX, and I'm joined by Alice. Alice works in our marketing team. I'm also joined by Steve, and I'm going to be handing you over to Steve very shortly. Steve is one of our, as an ILX associate trainer, and he has a wealth of experience within IT. He's been working in IT, numerous roles, as project manager, service manager for the last 35 years. And more latterly has been working as a trainer and as a consultant. So rest assured, you're in very safe, capable hands. But before I do hand you over, I've just got a few housekeeping bits and bobs that I'd like to go through with you. So first of all, we've got 40 minutes scheduled for this call. Steve's going to be chatting to you for about sort of 25, 30 minutes max, so that we can allow some time for questions and answers at the end of the session. So if we can keep those to the end, that'd be very much appreciated. You'll notice to the right-hand side of your screen, you have got a question box. So please do feel free to submit any questions. Alice will collate those and we can read those out at the end, and hopefully we'll give you answers to all of those questions, time permitting. We will be recording this session, so if you need to duck out, you get the unexpected postman arrive, or you'd like to forward this recording onto any of your colleagues, we will email you a recording of this session and that will arrive with you tomorrow, Friday. Okay, so that's questions and answers. If everyone can keep themselves muted, that would be really very much appreciated. Also, if you're not already doing so, please do follow us. We're on all of these social platforms where we're posting lots of really good stuff, so we can keep you updated with blogs, promotions, insights, new product launches. It's a really great way to keep in touch with us at ILX. Last but not least, if after the session you'll be sent a feedback form, very short. If you can provide us some feedback, that's really helpful. So it just helps us to be able to improve on these types of sessions so that you can get greater value from them. I'm going to be chatting to you a little bit later on, but for now I'm going to pass you over to Steve, and I hope you find this session really informative. So over to you, Steve. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sally. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve. As been mentioned, I'm an associate with ILX, have been for a long number of years. My role these days is mainly as a trainer, but over the past 30 odd years, I have acquired a fair degree of experience in certain aspects of IT, and ITIL for the last 20 years has been a quite big part of my life too. I started working with version 2 and I've worked my way through version 3 and 4. And for me, it's been quite an essential part of my training portfolio. What I have found in recent years, though, is that ITIL is never standalone. You can never just look at ITIL as being the panacea of service management and service delivery, and you do need to take into account other frameworks and practices from other methods, such as Agile and from Scrum. And more recently, I've been finding that DevOps has been becoming quite an important part of my world also. Anyways, without further ado, let's move on to ITIL itself. What are we actually going to cover on this webinar for you guys is to introduce you to the contents of the foundation course, present with you the key concepts, and hopefully stimulate interest to come back and dig deeper with us. It's a good course. It's very, very interesting, very relevant as well these days, because we always think of services as products, but rarely do we actually think about what goes into providing a service. And this gives you that depth. ITIL 4 is an evolution. I mean, I've been around since version 2 with ITIL, and it was very limited in its presentation, shall we say. It went mainstream with version 3, but ITIL 4 has now grown up, and there's a lot of good value to be gained from this method. So we'll talk to you about what's new, what's different. Some of the questions and some of the answers that you guys at the end will have will be tied into version 3, moving to version 4. Now, before we begin, my colleague Alice has got a small little poll which we'd like to run with you guys, just to get some idea as to where you guys are coming from before you begin this course. So you'll see there are 4 questions. Again, if you just simply choose one of those answers there and click on submit. I can't see it here, I can see it on my spare machine. I can see you guys there. Just let us know where you are, because we do get quite a few people with a version 3 background looking to go to version 4. But we also get some people who are new to this arena as well. So we just need to make sure we tailor this session with the majority in mind. Okay. Have you all answered? Great stuff there. Excellent. Fantastic. So some of you guys have already got some experience of version 3. Some of you are familiar with it, but you haven't done the exams. Don't worry, your life is none the poorer for not doing that. And some of you have got very little familiarity as well. So we've got a bit of a split here, 3, 3, and 3. So we'll take that on board, folks, and move ourselves forward, okay? So with a bit of luck, my screen will now change, and you now will be seeing why ITIL 4. Well, for those of you who've gone down the ITIL 3 road, it came out in 2007. And it came out really as a response to the staid aspects of ITIL 2. And ITIL 2 was fantastic. It gave us some guidance which we hadn't had previously, but it was very limited. ITIL 3 widened the scope of service delivery and service management and looked at all aspects of guidance which was out there. Downside, of course, here that you often look at something new, and if you haven't got something previously to replace it, you often follow it in a rote style, by routine. And that was the danger with ITIL version 3. People took it as gospel. And quite often people saw it as being the what needs to be done without actually considering how it needs to be done. And that's what ITIL 4 gives us. It's taken on board some of the gaps and some of the inconsistencies, and it's tried to address the way in which we look at services, not purely from a service delivery lifecycle approach, but more from a tailoring, a customer focus approach. And also ITIL 4 came along after 14 years of ITIL 3, so it was probably ready for an upgrade anyways. So why do we use ITIL? What's the big benefit? Key thing here, folks, is consistency. Consistency in terms of the terms being used, some of the concepts that we encounter. And one of the most important concepts in ITIL is value. What is it that matters to us? What do we value? And we as providers have to understand that. We've got to make sure we align our provision with customers and sponsors alike. When we have teams working together as well, internal teams as well as external teams, what we don't want to have is different interpretations of key terms that might affect the way in which we deliver a service to our customer. And therefore, we might under-deliver on value as far as the customer is concerned. A simple example someone gave me in a previous course was if you look at a car, over here in the UK, that thing at the front where the engine sits in most cars, that's the bonnet that covers it, isn't it? Whereas over in the US, they call it something else, don't they? They call it the hood. And that thing at the back where we put our shopping, we've been to Sainsbury's or Tesco's, we call it the boot and they call it the trunk. We're talking about the same thing, but we actually use different terms. And that sort of confusion can be eliminated quite easily by having a consistent glossary or lexicon, and ITIL tries to take that a step further. One thing I found some years ago working with a particular customer, a law firm actually here in Leeds, where I live, is they went down the ITIL road for one simple reason, is they felt they were missing out. There were a number of features within the ITIL framework which they hadn't taken into account with ITIL version 2, but ITIL 3 actually gave them a bigger picture, a bigger canvas to work with. What ITIL gives you is completeness in your approach to IT service management, and with ITIL version 4, digital transformation as well. And finally there, folks, if you are going to be providing a service to other customers, you might need something else to support you on that journey. And that's where ISO 20000 comes in. Now, ISO 20000, if you're not familiar with it, it's a measure of how competent you are in delivering IT service and what standards and frameworks are you making use of. A very quick example here, folks. When you take money out of a cash machine, let's say, I don't know, let's take Santander. You go to a Santander cash machine and your bank account is with NatWest. That transaction flows between the banks very quickly. What you're not aware of, though, is between that transaction, there is a transaction house. The two banks are liaising with the transaction house, providing an IT service. Now, some years ago, one of the transaction houses struggled to get the business off one of the main banks in the UK, one of the big four. I won't mention their name. They went out and got themselves ISO 20000 accredited. And to do that, they took on board the ITIL framework and all the learnings that came with it. When they got themselves ISO 20000 accredited with ITIL's help, almost within 2 weeks, they signed up that missing bank. And they've now gone on to be the biggest provider of that service. So if you are trying to make a journey beyond just simply internal provision to external provision, you're looking at something like ISO 20000, ITIL will definitely help you. Anyways, let's move on to some of the key concepts we need to understand and consider. ITIL offers us 2 levels of understanding in the exam. So you'll see at the bottom of the screen there, this reference to Bloom's level 1, and you'll see on the next slide level 2. What we do on these training courses, of course, is give you all the tools needed to pass the exam, but also to try and contextualize what these concepts, these terms actually mean. Now take a service. We'll be looking at services throughout. You'll hear that phrase, service value system, service value chain, mentioned all the time. A service is a means of delivering value, and value is made up of utility and warranty. So we need to get our heads around what matters to the customer. And thankfully, there are courses in the ITIL portfolio designed to do exactly that. We often look at services as products because that's how they're often portrayed to us. For example, your mobile phone package. You might have a low, medium, and high usage package. And of course, we see that service as a product because of how it's presented. Utility often represents, as far as I'm concerned, the functional requirements of anything we offer. So a mobile phone, my mobile phone comes with email. I can make calls, surprisingly. I can send texts. But for me, the biggest functional benefit for me is the ability to load apps. And one in particular these days for me, Shazam. When I'm out in the pub with my daughter and she hears some music playing and she tells me who the band is, the next time I hear a song coming along, I quickly have a Shazam under the table and I tell her who it is before she tells me. It makes me look cool. Doesn't last very long. But that's a utility aspect. It's a functional requirement. Now my phone is a Samsung and I have a warranty and dimension with it, namely insurance. And these are 2 aspects which, when combined, deliver value to customers in the form of services. Deliver value to who? Well, you'll see there are 3 stakeholders listed there: customers, users, and sponsors, and they all have different aspects of interest in the service. The customer is probably the most important one of all. When I left accountancy years ago, I worked on a service desk, and one of the messages that I took away, even to this day, is the phrase, nobody ever won an argument with a customer. And it's so true. So you've got to make sure you understand your customer, their dimension on value, their requirements, their pressures. You need to understand the service you deliver has to be aligned against their requirements. So the customer defines requirements, but they're defining those requirements on behalf of those who will be impacted or those who will consume the service. So in this house, we have broadband. My name's on the bill, so I'm the customer. My wife, my daughter, my son, they all tell me what TV channels they want to watch. So I go back to Virgin Media and I get the TV channels changed. So I define the requirements in response to my users' needs. And the sponsor, well, the sponsor and the customer can be the same. The sponsor puts the money on the table. They are the ones who fund or finance the service. And to bring all this together, of course, we need to have a series of capabilities which we don't normally call upon, and that's what service management represents. IT service management is all about capabilities which you have in your particular line of business, which you wouldn't expect to see elsewhere. Take Amazon. There's a good example of capabilities. Now, those concepts get explored further in the next slide here, where we now have to start demonstrating that we actually know what this means. So we look at things like costs, costs incurred, costs avoided, costs that might be substitutes. And of course, all of that can affect our perception of value. I mean, most people see price and costs as a key measure of value. Have we saved this? Has it increased sales by that? The value can often be measured in a financial way, but value quite often, folks, is measured in a non-financial way, and we need to understand what value means and what it represents. It's the lifeblood of the service. And again, within the organization, there are different departments who provide the aspects of the service, the facilities, and quite often they're working towards some predefined goal. And that's what an output can represent. So a newly registered user is an output. It's a thing, it's a deliverable. Now here we are, folks, time-wise, it's now 12:15. We're getting close to lunchtime. So you guys will go and get some lunch at some point. I'll go downstairs, I might get a cup of soup. Okay, I might have a sandwich, who knows? But that's an output. But what does it result in? The result is I will no longer be hungry. And from an IT service perspective, we've got to look at the outputs we offer to our customers and what outcomes do they enable for our customers to achieve. So if we register a new user, then they can become productive in whatever field they're working in. And what we have to do, of course, is take into account any risk, any uncertainty that may exist, and of course, make sure the utility and the warranty is defined appropriately. These concepts are quite powerful. They do extend quite a bit into any everyday thinking, not just ITIL thinking. Now, when we start talking about the 7 guiding principles, you notice I got a bit excited there because these 7 areas, we often assume that they are IT specific only, but these 7 aspects are things that we also carry out ourselves in life. What I'm looking at here, folks, are 7 embedded behaviors, 7 aspects of our life that we just naturally fall into. What's a principle? If you guys saw somebody struggling to open a door, their hands were full with books or boxes, you'd go over and you'd open the door for them to help them. Of course you would. It's a natural behavior. We're decent people, we would do that. But my point is, that's a principle. Courtesy, respect, dignity even. So what we're doing here, folks, is calling upon natural embedded ways of thinking. When you're delivering an IT service, the first thing you should always do is understand where you are first of all. Start where you are and build where there are gaps. Make sure that everything delivers value, however that's measured. Don't deliver everything in one go. Maybe deliver it in steps and stages. And make sure you don't miss a trick by thinking holistically. I won't read the rest of these out to you, but on the training course, we will actually go through these because these are central to the way we think as well. Everything's important in ITIL, but these guys here most certainly are. Now, if we're looking at the principles, which are our underlying behaviors, then what we've also got to take into account is how those 7 principles interact with these things called the 4 dimensions. Now, the 4 dimensions of service management, you'll see those 4 hexagon, cubey type shapes in the diagram there. I haven't worked out the hexagons on cubes, to be honest with you, but there they are anyways. These represent the 4 major areas of consideration when you're designing a service. Now, for those of you with an ITIL v3 background, we used to call those the 4 Ps of service design. And because ITIL v3 was very narrow in some of the applications of those concepts, ITIL version 4 has said, okay, the 4 Ps were useful in service design, but they're actually worth considering all the way across the service. So you can see what I'm saying here. It's actually grown up in the way in which it tackles these 4 elements. Organization and people are those who deliver and consume. We have to consider the different user bases, the supply bases. The information and technology looks at the hardware. It goes a bit further actually. It looks at the accommodation, the software and the hardware, yes, but also documentation might be involved too. Partners and suppliers is important because cultural dimensions, legal dimensions might affect who you can work with. You may be subject to NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and that might prevent you working with certain suppliers. And again, that's a key input in how we deliver the service. And value streams and processes. A process is a series of activities. A service desk has an incident management process. If we outsource our service desk, we need to be sure that the processes are the same as ours. They are complete. And again, that's a consideration when you're making that sort of decision. And those 4 together will deliver value, products and services for our customers. We've got to consider what's important in the makeup of that product and service. Now, these are things that we can control. They're within that little double hexagon sort of shape there. Looks like the logo for a Kia car, doesn't it, a little bit, thinking about it. But around the outside there, you see there are 6 external factors, which you could probably consider to be constraints. Personally, I look at them as risk areas. These are things that could undermine your ability to deliver the service as you would like, based on the 4 dimensions. I mean, the political one there in the top left-hand corner, and I have been advised not to use this word, but you know what? I like a risk. Brexit, what a nightmare. I'm Irish, I voted Remain. But the country voted to leave, so we're leaving. And you see the news stories these days, what's happening down at Dover, the congestion that's happening. There are political decisions that have consequences in the way we deliver a service. Legal, technology, there might be certain compatibilities you've got to take into account. Can you make an IBM device speak with a HP device? Maybe, maybe not. But there's a technical consideration that's beyond your control. And finally, legal, of course, means we have to comply with regulations. Whether you like them or not, we've got to comply with them. So these are the 4 dimensions. These are key inputs into delivering the service, considering what makes up the service. But how do we deliver the service and how do we deliver value? And here's one of the biggest concepts they brought about in version 4 compared to 3. They've dispensed with the service lifecycle approach in version 3 to go with this, the service value system. This is a new concept and it's a bigger concept as well. On the far right-hand side, we have value being delivered to our customers, however we describe and define it. Remember, no one wins an argument with the customer, so we've got to make sure we understand that value. But what prompts us to trigger creating this service in the first place is on the left-hand side. Opportunity, demand. I mean, we're in strange times at the moment, folks, but how many of us here prior to last March would ever have had a meeting in Zoom? And now, of course, Zoom seems to be the most regular routine. ILX were delivering courses and go-to training way before the pandemic, but Zoom seems to be the one that's taken off, mainly because it's free, I think. But the triggers on the left-hand side, the response to those triggers on the right-hand side. And to make sure we deliver the right thing to the customer, we have this thing in the middle, the service value system. Now, at the weekend, I saw a film, Shrek. Anyone ever seen the film Shrek? There's a phrase in there that he comes out with. It talks about ogres being like onions. And if you look at the service value system, it's like an onion in some respects. It's got layers to it, and you peel back to get to the heart of it, which is the service value chain. Now, I've talked about guiding principles with you already. This is the underlying behavior, common sense behavior, commercial behavior. How do we make use of that in delivering the service to the customers to ensure value is delivered? We'll describe that on the training course. Governance is the one area we don't actually delve into on the course, and it depends on the nature of the industry you work in. If you work in the legal sector compared to the finance sector compared to the R&D sector, then the governance rules are different. But what governance gives us is some indication of direction and control. At the center, we have the value chain. The value chain is vital. The service value chain is a combination of activities, depending upon the service you're producing, that results in something being produced that will deliver value to our customer. And that's the heart of the value system. We'll talk about this in a later slide. Practices, well, again, a bit of mix and match, isn't it? Think of practices as being like ingredients in a recipe. You use different combinations of ingredients depending on what meal you're creating. And when you're creating a service for a customer, it might be a service desk offering you may be putting out there. You may tailor it differently from different providers for different customers. So the practices are a bit of mix and match depending upon what it is you're trying to deliver. And of course, continual improvement. Well, if we don't change, if we don't innovate, we stagnate. And one of the legends of the ITIL world, a fellow called Steve Mann, a guy from York, I've got immense respect for, he once came out with the phrase, if you don't look after your customers, somebody else will. And you've got to stay close. That value equation on the right-hand side, that can change. Value is not a constant. We need to constantly improve and understand what the triggers are, and more importantly, what the offerings are that we should be delivering to our customers. Nobody wins an argument with a customer. Now the value chain, the heart of it. Now you'll notice that little diamond that we had in the middle of the previous slide. That's actually described here. It consists of 6 activities which you will make use of depending upon the nature of the service that you're offering to your customers. The way we teach this is to take a mnemonic, a little word being made out of the first letter of each activity. PIDOD, I know there's no such word in the English language, but there is an ITIL course and there is an exam. Planning, improving, and engaging, the first 3 there, the PI. Now, the engage activity is realistically the first activity you touch on to understand requirements from customers. Those requirements then need to be planned for. Can we achieve them? Can we deliver them? Have we the budget? Have we the resources and the capabilities? Once that decision's made to go ahead and build a service, we've got to first of all lay out some structure. And that's where the design and transition activities now start to come into play. And those 3 in the middle there, design and transition, obtain and build, and deliver and support, for version 3 people, that would have been service transition, where you set about taking on board the requirements, getting the resources together first of all, and then building the service. And that little boundary there between obtain and build and deliver and support, that is the difference between release and deployment management. Because obtain and build, the end result is you produce something that sits on the shelf waiting for the customer to put it in their basket. Once they put it in their basket and they take it home, then that's when deliver and support kicks in. That is the go live line between those 2 points there. Obtain and build and deliver and support. That's the transition from on the shelf to in use. And of course, the improve activity you see at the bottom there, well, that's also supported by that arrow you see going from value back to demand. As I keep saying to you guys, if you don't look after your customers, somebody else will. And we've always got to change. I mean, I've changed throughout my life the products I offer and the support I offer around the portfolio because I've had to. You know, everything changes. It's a guaranteed aspect of life in IT. Now, this value chain isn't something that's static, isn't fixed, because within the value chain, we have a number of value streams. Depending upon the service we're offering to our customers, we may call upon these activities at different points to different degrees of intensity, depending upon the nature of the product or service we are producing. And that little blue box, which I haven't mentioned so far, that's the end game as far as these 6 activities are concerned, because it's those activities which produce a product or service that the customer benefits from, they derive value from. This example here is a new service request coming through. And there's the engage and the plan sequence that I described to you. But remember, folks, the improve activity is all the time on the go there. It's not a one-off activity. A more complex looking value stream is this one, which I'm not even going to begin to describe to you, but can you see the journey? Something has been delivered. Now it's been resourced better, designed better, refined better, and we keep that improvement cycle on the go all the time. Now, the value system and the value chain are 2 key concepts. But the practices that we need to make use of within the value chain, they've been extended in ITIL version 4. Now, in ITIL version 3, we had 10 processes. We had 1 function, the service desk. In version 3, we had 26 processes. They went berserk. And we had 4 functions, 4 groups of individuals who carry out the activities. I'm glad to say in ITIL version 4, they've actually now grown up and they've recognized that the processes and the functions, they're not separate, they have to coexist. And that's where the practice now has evolved. You're bringing together functions and processes and any other resource that's used to deliver value via that practice. Now they're grouped together here in these 3 pillars where you have general management practices. Those are embedded in the business, but they're also very relevant to IT service management. The ones that are more relevant to service management are in the middle. So you've got things like availability, capacity, good old change, you never lose that one, will you? And then on the right-hand side, more specific, more narrow in their application is the technical practices. Now, what you will notice from this slide is that some of these are in bold because those are the ones that we cover on an ITIL foundation course. We investigate these to a certain level of intensity for the exam, driven by the syllabus, but also we touch on others to make sure that the value isn't undermined either. And you'll see the 2 groupings there. I mean, for example, those on the left-hand side, those are the 7 that we will certainly investigate a lot more. So we'll take them out of the 3 pillars and group them as you can see there. There are certain terms and certain definitions that need to be, if you like, investigated further, like what is an IT asset? Event management is one of my favorite areas because it's so much common sense built into one little practice. And configuration items, configuration management in version 2, that was the underpinning discipline for service support. And I'm glad to say it's still equally valuable and recognized and respected in version 4. On the other side there, those other practices that you see there, so CI, change enablement, I beg your pardon, I got the wrong way around, haven't I? Sorry. The ones on the left-hand side are the ones we don't touch on in great depth. It's the ones on the right-hand side there. Sorry, it's my glasses, folks. They're very focal. I'm sometimes struggling to work out what I'm seeing here. Like a nodding dog, aren't I? The ones on the right-hand side are the detailed ones. The ones on the left-hand side are the ones we touch on. And we have to go into the depth of detail on the right-hand side that the syllabus dictates. And likewise, on the right-hand side, as I say, we touch on those to make sure that they are covered to the right depth of detail. Now, where does it all fit in, this ITIL Foundation course, into the grand scheme? Well, there is actually a certification scheme, as you can see out there, folks. We come in at the bottom. Now, people with version 3 Foundation, I've got some bad news for you. There is no bridging exam. You have to take the ITIL 4 Foundation in its entirety. There's no easy path, no upgrade path. But that's not a bad thing, because there are quite a few new concepts in version 4. And really, to do justice and respect to the syllabus, it's probably best to take the exam in its totality anyways. You'll notice there at the top of the top left-hand corner of that diagram, we have this managing professional transition stream. Now, there are a number of credits knocking around from version 3s, and some of you people in the classroom here, at least a third of the audience, were familiar with the idea of credits. If you have 17 credits or higher, you are in a position where you can actually then take the ITIL Managing Professional Transition exam. It's basically one exam that covers those 4 topics you see just below. It's an hour and a half. It's not a simple exam, believe you me. It's actually quite a tough one. Very rewarding though. And again, you can get access to that one via ILX as well. If you don't have the 17 credits and you wish to take on board the learning of the transition lifecycle phase here of the qualifications, then there are 4 courses you can call upon. Now, in the webinar next week, we'll be talking about create, deliver, and support and driving stakeholder value. Now, these are looking at aspects of the value chain in more depth. When you're looking at the engine room of ITIL, you're looking at those who build and support the service. Well, that is the middle of the value chain, and that's create, deliver, and support. We'll talk about the suitability next week. And when you're looking at understanding your customer, you're looking to drive stakeholder value, then you need to understand the trigger and the end result of the value chain. And we spend time on this course here, driving stakeholder value, understanding the user journey and the customer journey. The customers pay, so obviously not pay, they define, sponsors pay, but they're all equally important. And finally, folks, here, the strategist lifecycle stream deals with direct, plan, and improve on both sides of the exam stream there. And it's looking more at the governance and the strategic thinking that goes into providing an IT service. High velocity IT, well, I work in a number of tuition areas now. I've now just teach. I no longer manage projects or deliver services. I used to run a training service many years ago for a bank, and it's all very regimented. Making change was actually a challenge. With Agile and Scrum, that's not the case anymore. And you now find that high velocity IT is bringing in more agile thinking into the ITIL world. If you're going to go down the DevOps road, maybe that might be a good course to consider. Now, the managing professional stream covers those 4 courses. If you've got the 17 credits, you can do 1 exam. If you haven't, then you can do the individual courses and build yourself up to that blue bar when you get that accreditation. The right-hand side, I'll be honest with you folks, is not an area I'm that skilled with, mainly because it's quite new. The last qualification there, Digital and IT Strategy. Now, this exam and this course is a lot more involved than the others on the left-hand side. This one requires you to do assessments and give them to your tutor. You've got to submit a logbook of experience. And that's good because it adds some credibility to the qualification. And also the people who work in that space, you'd want to know that they have been around the block and they have actually got experience of delivering a service. Now, both of those streams, managing professional and the strategic leader, if you took both of those and got yourself to the place where you've actually got both exams and both statuses, then you are an ITIL master. Now, that did exist in version 3, but an ITIL master was a very experiential-led qualification. People had logbooks and experiences. They had to pass all the exams. When I trained ITIL masters, the first Norwegian one I trained, sorry, the first Scandinavian one, I beg your pardon, he was from Norway, you gathered. And this guy was, he knew his stuff, you know, but he wasn't the sort of guy I'd want to sit next to at a dinner table. I'd like to talk about a film, and he'd want to talk about capacity management. You know, they are very intense people when they get to that stage, ITIL masters. There are so few of them, but it's a very, very well-respected qualification. Anyways, guys, I'm talking too much as normal, but then again, what do you expect? I'm Irish. The exam, you'll find there, folks, it's very straightforward affair, just like version 3. It's a closed book exam. You turn up, whatever's in your head is your resource. It's an hour. You got to get 26 or higher to pass, 65%. You will, of course, need to provide photo ID now as well, because it's an Axelos delivered exam, and people cert are the facilitators, and they are quite picky. And the last point there, folks, if you do the exam at home, I think you'll have very few problems. It's when you're using work machines and you have other network security settings, that can be a problem. And if you do pass, folks, well, you get some freebies, you get some gifts from Axelos, and some of these are definitely well worth looking into. First of all, you get a Foundation CPD digital badge. You know, something that actually shows you've made an investment in yourself, and you should be recognized for that. And you'll see there also you get access to a number of resources on the Axelos website through the My ITIL link. You know, you've got white papers, you've got some tools, you've also got some detailed documentation around the practices, which you don't have on the training courses. Most definitely worth looking into, folks. Okay, well, that's it from me there. I hope I've given you a little feel for what's involved in the foundation course. I love teaching ITIL Foundation. There's so much to call upon, and there's so much relevance in what we do as well. You've got to be enthusiastic, haven't you? Anyways, enough from me. I'm going to pass you back now to Sally, who's got something to talk to you about around the courses. So over to you, Sally. Hi, Sally. Alice.
Ah, there. I'm unmuted now. Sorry about that. Oh, thanks, Steve. That was a really comprehensive and easy to understand overview. So thank you, much appreciated. Listeners, if you are interested in taking the ITIL 4 Foundation training course with ILX, we have got some offers on at the moment for the people that have joined the webinar today. So there is a 30% off not only the ITIL 4 Foundation training course, but all of the other courses within the certification scheme. So ILX have invested in developing e-learning and virtual courses for each of those, for each of the managing professional and strategic leader tracks. So if you want to do some training with us, please do get in touch. There is a contact us email address at the bottom of the screen. So if you're interested in running training as a corporate event where you have a number of people, a cohort of learners, again, we can support you and help you and guide you through that. If you're an individual and you just want to book on a course for yourself, then you can go directly to our website, ilexgroup.com. You can enter the discount code and it will automatically give you that 30% discount on any of the courses that you see on that screen. Also, if you are looking to get to the ITIL Managing Professional designation, we do have e-learning bundles. Again, if you want a little bit more information on those, please do get in touch. And then last but not least, this is the second of a series of 4 webinars. As Steve mentioned earlier, next week we'll be touching on the training courses Create, Deliver and Support, and also Drive Stakeholder Value. So that will be we'll be running that next January on January the 28th, and then we'll be doing a following webinar the week after. So please, if you're interested, come and join us at those future sessions. And I think that's it from me now. So hopefully we have received some questions. So I'm going to hand you over to Alice, who will read out those questions, and hopefully we have time to answer them all. So thanks for everybody for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sally. We don't actually have any questions through, which I'm going to take as, Steve, you've done your job perfectly and answered everyone's questions as we've gone through. I'll just give it a couple of minutes just in case anyone wants to speedily ask one now, and just reiterate while I'm here that you will all be emailed a recording of this webinar tomorrow. So if you do rewatch it and suddenly have any other questions after that, feel free to get in contact with us. And we can direct you to someone who can answer your question. But yeah, I take it as a compliment, Steve. No questions.
Excellent. Okay. Great stuff.
But we will hang on a few minutes, so if people are just sort of collecting their thoughts. I don't know about you all, but I was completely absorbed there, so it may just take a little time to sort of think about the questions you'd like to ask.
Yeah, sorry, there's just a quick one that's just come in that says, is the exam for ITIL Master version 4 available?
ITIL Master isn't an exam, it's a status. You get a designation when you've passed the Managing Professional track and the Strategic Leader track. So you're actually granted that. It hasn't been formulated officially either yet. So I'm going to put a little caveat in here. It may be that in the future there may be an exam in addition to passing those 2 exam tracks and acquiring the Managing Professional designation and Strategic Leader. But Axelos haven't yet published what ITIL Master ultimately will look like. So we're as much in the dark, I'm afraid, on this one as you guys are. And everyone's in the same boat as well with this one. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Steve. There's a few questions coming in now, right? Another one, which I think is probably best directed at Sally, says, what would the approximate cheapest cost to get to ITIL Master be?
that would be to get to do the bundle, which will get you to your managing professional designation. And if you go onto the website, we have got the bundle product there with the 30% discount. I think it comes in at around, without the discount, it's £2,800, and that gives you 18 months of e-learning for each of those courses within the managing professional track. But that's without the discount, and that also includes your official manual and also all of the exams pertaining to each of those courses.
Cool, thank you, Sally. A question for Steve. We've got, how does ITIL link with ETOM? I don't know what that means, but I'm hoping you do.
I'm in the same boat as you, actually. ETOM's a new one on me as well, actually. There's so many of these mnemonics floating around there. Can I ask the question, which area or which industry does ETOM, are you actually working in with using ETOM?
Okay, I'll see if they come back to that. Read out a different question in the meantime. Oh, it says ETOM is for architecture.
It's a good foundation for ETOM. I've never seen any link or any reference to ETOM in the ITIL materials. I'll be honest with you, but that doesn't mean to say it doesn't exist either. But we certainly don't make reference to it on the course. But if you're delivering any IT service or any structure around IT service delivery, then the foundation of ITIL will equip you very strongly, I imagine, for most of these qualifications and methods and practices that are out there, to be honest. So we don't have any reference to it, but I can't see why it wouldn't be a bad thing to take on board anyways.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Steve. Question from the same person, actually, who's asked, if I'm an ITIL 4 managing professional, how many papers do I need to take, as I have upgraded from ITIL version 3 expert to ITIL version 4 managing professional?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I've done as well. That's my level of qualification too. I did the one exam like this. The person asked the question back in March, passed it, and at that stage, the only exam that was missing, only course that was missing, was the DITS on the far right hand side. I'll just go back to that screen there. So it's the digital and IT strategy. Now that hadn't been formulated at that point, and that's the only one that's missing. But that's the one that's become a little bit more involved in passing because of the nature of the topics being addressed. The digital strategic leaders looking at delivering services and looking at the marketplace and looking at your position in other areas, not just in terms of delivery, but strategic positioning. And they actually have now made it a condition that the people who go on that course have to submit coursework to the tutor, and there's an exam at the end of it as well. And I believe, well, I haven't investigated this myself yet, but I believe there might be an interview potentially as well, if there's any question marks around the experiences. So to answer your question, you may have one more exam, but it's not just one exam. That digital and IT strategy course is a lot more involved. And we've only just been finding out about it ourselves as well. I know that ILX have an offering in this area, one of the first ones to get in there with an offering, but it's not a trivial exam to pass. I'll be honest with you, a trivial designation to acquire. You'll see there from the diagram that the other four, the ones in burgundy on the left-hand side there, CDS, stakeholder value, high velocity IT, I mean, those all make up the professional stream. And then the direct, plan and improve, that actually sits in both camps. So if you passed managing professional transition, as I have, as you have by the sounds of things as well, then we would both be in the position where we just need to do one exam. But as I say, that digital and IT strategy exam and that course is not as straightforward as it used to, as we may have expected it to be, based on the requirements they now have from Axelos.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Next question. How is problem management dealt with in ITIL 4?
It's still there. It's one of the major practices which we investigate. You'll see there on the right-hand side. So we do look at it. In terms of its structure, it's not as detailed as it was in version 3, but it is equally relevant, and it's a natural progression, obviously, from incident management. It's central to what we do in deliver and support. But again, you see, the whole thinking of ITIL 4 is rather than pigeonholing processes and practices in one life cycle phase, they actually have an impact all over the life cycle. And if I go back to here, for example, there you can see the deliver and support phase, bottom right-hand corner of that little cube. Problem management typically would sit there. But of course, people who work in problem management are looking for things proactively that could cause problems. So they may also be able to identify design changes. They may even be able to work with customers to preempt certain occurrences. So that we're making problem management and incident management much more complete in the service offering and not just pigeonholing it in the operations space that it would have been done previously.
Cool, thank you. Next question, does ITIL 4 speak to SIAM's the acronym, so Service Integration and Management?
Yeah, they are separate qualifications. They do interact. On the supplier management side, we do have reference in the ITIL 4 foundation course to SIAM, the fact that they integrate at that level. So yeah, there is a connection between the two. In terms of the detail, they don't supply it to us on the course, and I haven't studied SIAM yet myself, but there is a reference to it, and there's a clear synergy between those two frameworks at that level, supplier management in particular.
Okay, great. Next question, how have you found ITIL 4 working with Agile and DevOps, especially in the transition space?
Actually better, to be honest with you, because the key thing when you're working as an Agile project manager, as I was many years ago, is the culture change that you're expecting. People are very resistant to change. And what Agile will do is encourage people to start taking, not risks, but being more flexible in their approach. And you'll find now that ITIL 4 has Agile thinking seeded throughout it. And people are now starting to look at ways of delivering value quicker, rather than this structured process-led approach from version 3. So I'm finding when I work with customers now that I'm getting better feedback. And also, of course, it's never one size fits all. It's never just one meal satisfies the whole party. You've got to have several different dishes available. And when you're working as a service manager, service delivery manager, you are looking at Agile and Scrum and DevOps. You're trying to get all those bits of value drawn out of those frameworks to help you. So it's not just one size fits all or one framework fits all. But I am finding, though, that the feedback is that people are now seeing less resistance to change, and it's becoming a lot quicker. In fact, I was teaching DevOps this week, and the people I was teaching were saying the same thing about once you get Agile thinking into people's heads, then you find the resistance starts to flatten down. And the same applies here with ITIL.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Steve. That looks like all of the questions from everyone. I'm just double checking. But yeah, if that's everything from everyone, then that brings us up to pretty good time. So yeah, I'll just hand back over to Sally to close off. But thank you again, Steve and Sally.
Thank you.
It's just to say thank you everybody for listening, and if you are interested in our future webinars within these series, we'll be emailing you details of those, so please do join us, and I wish everybody a very good afternoon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Take care.